Hi everyone, it's Kim, a study abroad specialist. In today's video, what I wanted to do was to dive a bit more as we're looking ahead to 2026 and beyond, as we get to the end, believe it or not, of this decade, to look at some of the emerging locations for study abroad. The big four are not being phased out, but there are lots of different places now that students are looking. And so I want to cover that, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So welcome to the channel, everyone. If you are new here, again, my name is Kimber, and I'm here to make your study abroad journey easier. And if you are returning, welcome back. I'm so excited to dive into this today because I know that this is always a topic when students are trying to figure out where they want to go, what program they want to do, and the location really matters to a lot of people. But I do know that there has been a significant shift, particularly in 2024 and 2025. I don't usually like to date my videos, but I am filming in 2025. And as we're looking forward into 2026 and sort of closing out this decade, some of the trends are starting to really show that there is a shift in students for a variety of reasons, starting to look past the big four. So what are the big four? So the big four are going to be, as you would imagine, the large four countries that you hear about that are partners in crime and a lot of different things, and that sort of rule the world in a lot of ways. So United States, of course, Canada, the United Kingdom, and then last but not least, Australia. And for many years, many decades, these have been the top destinations for students to study abroad, to get degrees abroad. But that tide is shifting for a variety of reasons. And in a lot of ways, they are overlapping reasons. So for most students right now, you're going to fall into one of three categories of why you might be, or all three, why you might be considering looking outside of the big four. So one of the major reasons is a lot of students are having troubles with permits and visas for being able to get in. So I know in Canada right now, there's a huge issue with limiting the permit, so capping the amount of permits that they're going to give out per year. And then you look at a country like Australia, where they're really focusing on genuine student testing. So trying to look at, maybe adding a different layer of what people have to prove in order to be able to get a student visa, which in itself is not bad, but it does, again, create another hoop for people to go to. For most of the countries now, including the United States, you have to be able to show more of proof of financial income, which is, again, not bad. But again, based on how different countries work, they may not have the same type of documents. And so again, it's all based on, I understand that for most of these countries, the big four, they want to be able to ensure that they are not only giving their students a chance, but also making sure that the kids that come in are going to do the right thing. That is not bad. But it's, again, creating more red tape for people. And a lot of people just don't want to have to go through that. They're interested in getting straight to their studies and not having a lot of issues on that. And so that is primarily one of the issues. The next issue is just going to be affordability, that these larger countries are just not affordable anymore. And it's not like they were like super affordable. I mean, if you're going to go study abroad in London, or if you're coming to New York or wherever, that was never going to be super affordable for a student. But it's just the idea of being able to live, even if you are able to find a job afterwards, they're not considered to be affordable for what you have to get. I mean, the United States, obviously, compared to the other three, you even have to add in insurance, health insurance, and all these different things. Obviously, you don't have to worry about that in places like the UK. But it's just the idea that it's just not really affordable and sustainable, and that the quality of life is not as good. And then you go into more of the micro targeting, and depending on where you are and what you're doing, you're just worried about safety overall. I mean, without diving too much into it, a lot of students do fear for their life coming to the US, and we all know why that is, especially if you're in schools, and I'll just leave that there. But, and just if you're anywhere, frankly, in the US, actually. But overall, just thinking about that, and you've started to see this shift after the pandemic, right? Of people really evaluating what is important to them, what the values are. Even here in the United States, we've seen that shift. We saw like this big sort of people moving across the country, moving to different states and sort of really, I don't want to say dividing out because, people are doing what's best for them, but really trying to figure out where do I want to be? What do I want to do? And it's no different for students now trying to figure out what is going to be best for me? What's my future going to look like if I actually take this step? And what is it going to mean in the long term? The last but not least is the fact of why people are avoiding or starting to move away from the big four is because of the actual pipeline to be able to find opportunities. It's really, really hard. These particular countries are usually the hardest hit when there are any type of global upheavals economically. And we're seeing that right now where in most of these countries, job markets are really, really hard for people. And it's just not as sustainable. And it's like, if you look at that gap between, well, if I can't find a job, what can I do? In a lot of other emerging countries, there are more sort of ways to sustain yourself while you're looking for something and being able to at least figure it out as opposed to just being in free fall if you can't find a job within 6 months after your visa expires and you move into your next visa. So just thinking of it that way, these are some of the reasons why the tide is turning. And the additional part to that, which I'm going to start diving into as I talk about the countries, is because of the actual educational system. So looking at the actual value of the education that you're getting versus how much you're paying is also another important part for why people are considering emerging countries. So we're going to start with the first emerging country, which is Germany. So to start out by talking about Germany, so to let you know, as of 2025, Germany is actually now the #1 destination for study abroad students in all of Europe. So one of the great things about Germany is that it's still a very reputable and trusted country that most people know about within the region, but they do a lot of things that are more student focused and focused towards bringing people in and make sure that they can keep them there once they get in as international students. So one of the things that a lot of students love is with short-term programs in Germany. So if you're going and you're doing an internship program, a semester-long program, there's a lot of flexibility. So this is something that I have been ranting about for years and decades and eons forever. Probably since even when I was a baby, I was still ranting about it because it's something that has been a huge part of my life. And it's something that I know that more and more people need to benefit from. And it is something that a lot of educational systems within the big four do not do, but this is focused on experimental learning. So you will find that in Germany, there is a lot more of focus on that. So it's a lot more of a mix of classroom learning and then outside learning. So classroom learning, research-based learning, on-the-job learning, a mix of that to be able to give you well-rounded outside with just sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day and not really learning that much, let's be honest. So that's going to be really important. And then it also translates to their degree programs. And with their degree programs, it's also great too because they actually build that into most of their programs so that you have the classroom time and you get the time with the teachers, with the professors, but then they want you to go off and do research and to be able to do different elements of that. And then when it comes to degree programs, one of the great things that is drawing students to Germany is that whether you're going for undergrad or graduate programs, for public universities, so for universities run by the state primarily, it is going to be mostly free for students. Now, I do want to put a caveat in that housing is not included. So you will just want to keep in mind that you will still need to figure out your housing once you're there. And of course, none of your expenses are going to be included. But again, not having the weight of the tuition is going to be amazing. And even for the private universities, they do still charge students, but it's way cheaper than going to the UK or Australia and definitely coming to the US for university. And one of the positive things about Germany is that now, particularly, a lot of the programs are English speaking. So this is something that has taken place and really been something that they've been working towards over the past 20 to 25 years. Before, there was a lot of emphasis on needing to speak German, and there are for certain programs, but for more programs now, it's a lot more accessible to people who don't speak the language. You do just want to be aware, though, that if you eventually want to work there, there could be a language requirement in your workplace. So it's still a good idea to be able to learn the language, and there are lots of opportunities to do that. There's lots of low cost or free opportunities to do that in the country while you're there. So take advantage of that. But to actually get a degree or to go through a study abroad programs, there's a lot more options for English speaking people. So I wanted to point that out as well. The next thing to note is that the visa is pretty easy to get. So you're going to have 18 months, which is a very long time to be able to find work. This is crazy compared to 6 months in most countries, particularly in the big four, where you have about 6 months. And again, as I mentioned in a video I did recently where I was talking about common visa phrases, I'm going to link that above. But I was saying that typically you want to start way before those 6 months, especially given what's going on in any time for an economy where you want to be able to find a job, or you may have to apply for a different visa. But 18 months is a very long time to be able to find work. And there are opportunities to even take on part-time work and other type of gig work if you need to while you're there. So that is amazing. So that's another thing that is attracting students, to be able to not only be able to get the degree that they want at a more affordable level, but also to be able to find something that they actually want to do. You sort of have the scramble in the big four, right? Of you finish your degree, you're all done, and then if you want to stay there, which most people do want to stay for up to 2 years, however long you can stay, but you're really finding something. You may not always find what you want. You're trying to find what you can get to stay on. You don't have to live that way when you're in Germany, which is quite nice. And so that's something that students always, I've been hearing students talk about, of how it's really exciting to have that sort of length of time to find what you want. So as I mentioned before, the kind of only downside of everything I've been talking about is that if you do want to stay on, there may be a language proficiency that you're going to need to be able to work within the country. Now, one of the workarounds to this that you can use for any country, and I'm using it as if it's super simple, but one of the things that you can do is, if there's a company that you really, really want to work for that is also in your home country, you may want to consider having it where you can eventually do an intra-company transfer, because most of the time, if you are working in a company in your home country, it's going to be probably from your home country. So it's a company that, is just, maybe they're stationed in Germany, they're stationed in one of these countries. But that way you're able to work in the country, but you are in usually your native language. So for example, there are lots of American companies in places like Germany, including the US military, which is probably the biggest. There's so many American soldiers over there. And then lots of UK companies over there, lots of Australian companies. So that is a way to do it. But one of the things that I would just stress is that there's no harm, like I mentioned earlier, of just trying to learn the language. And this comes from someone who struggles with languages, foreign languages. But it is going to be a good opportunity for you to be able to move forward and do that. And again, there's so many resources, particularly in Germany, for you to be able to do that. So take advantage of that while you're there. So Germany is going to be the first one, and now we're going to move on to Japan. Japan is great because they are actually known as one of the most generous government bodies. I know, like, who would have thought that, a government was generous? But most governments are generous in handing out everything but common sense. But this particular government, they're known for being super generous with scholarships and grants and all these wonderful things. They want innovation, they want things to be fantastic and new and growth. I mean, pretty much, and I'm not trying to sort of fetishize them, but any type of Japanese product is going to be on point, like cars on point, food on point, like all that's always on point. It's just an esteemed way that they operate, and it's no different with education. Like, they really want people to get an education. So I would highly recommend, if you are interested in doing a study abroad program or a degree program in Japan, look at their programming. They're very generous with their funding. The other thing as well, similar to Germany, is that they are generous with the post-study visa. So they give you an opportunity as well to have a long period of time to find what you want to do. And very similar as well, they are starting to grow in STEM and robotics and business and all these different areas that people want to work in. And one of the great things about that is that English-based programming, again, is very, very on the rise. So compared to what it would have been even 10 years ago, it's on the rise. So don't feel intimidated by the language barrier. The other thing about it too is that in Japan, a lot of people do speak English. They may not speak the best English, but they do speak English. And so it may not be as hard of a barrier for you when you're trying to transition into the workplace. And there are tons of big four country companies in Japan. So they're over there. We do a lot of different trade with Japan as Westerners. And so just keeping that in mind that there are lots of different opportunities for you in Japan. The great part about Japan too is that they have also the Japanese government and other bodies have really made like a intent to have a career track for graduates. So that's fantastic that there's actually something set up for you to be able to move forward and sort of set up your career if you would like to. So that is something, again, that's very positive. And overall, the standard of living is very good. You know, it's a very safe country, very clean. And the other thing as well is that it's going to be something that's economical overall. Even if you're living in the bigger cities, it's a lot more economical than, let's say, living in a New York or a London or wherever you might live that's going to be in the big four. And that people feel like their money can go a lot further because of the way that they actually have to live and what they're expected to pay for. So I would definitely add Japan on my list if you are looking for a place outside of the big four to study, especially if you want to go to Asia. Now we're going to talk about Ireland. All right, so now we're talking about Ireland. So just a quick overview. If you're not familiar, you should be, but if you're not, just keeping in mind that there's Northern Ireland and Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. So we're talking about the Republic of Ireland. These are two different places. So Northern Ireland is a part of the UK. They have been since I think it's 1921, so over 100 years. And they used to be together, but now they're split. And that was also 100 years ago. And so we're talking about the Republic of Ireland, so the separate country that's on its own. So Ireland, Republic of Ireland, has become a rapidly growing location for study abroad students. I know quite a few students who have gone over to Ireland in the past 2 years or so to study. And there are a variety of reasons for that. Again, a lot of kids are feeling like, I don't want to go to the UK right now. I just feel like there's a lot of political upheaval. I don't know how I'll be received. There's a lot going on over there. And there's a lot going on in a lot of these big four places. But with Ireland, they feel like, well, it's still adjacent in a way. And I'll still get some of the similarities, although they are very different countries. But that I feel like I will be more able to culturally adapt. That's one of the things that people say a lot about Ireland is that there's a lot of cultural adaptation and how welcoming people are to so many different types of people, which is going to be fantastic. The other thing as well is that the cost of living is so different compared to living in the UK that you can find very affordable housing, which is rare in these big four countries. Obviously, you don't have to really worry about the healthcare. And then, of course, when you're actually trying to work, there's lots of available work for students and for people to be able to get on and do things. It's a lot harder in a place like the UK where it's usually reserved for people who are doing sort of a learning experience or a quick internship, but not necessarily to be able to just go and pick up a job at the pub the way that you can, or any place, the way that you can in a place like Republic of Ireland, where there's a lot of regular availability for that. In terms of the industries that have taken off in Ireland, so tech is huge. There's so many US and UK tech companies, but specifically for the US, lots of US tech companies have set up shop in the past 10 years in Ireland. Pharma is also another one. So if you want to work for big pharma, little pharma, they're over there. And then there's lots of different other businesses, sort of electronic businesses and other types of businesses that have set up shop in Ireland. And so it's going to be good for you as a student because, again, you're going to have an opportunity to find more work, more opportunities for internships and other things that are going on. Another thing that's interesting about Ireland is that they have lots of small student-friendly cities. So this is something that is a lot different than the big four countries because most of the big four countries are, I wouldn't say they're unstudent friendly, but typically unless you are in a city that is connected to a university, it's usually a large university, thinking like Austin or Madison in Wisconsin or NYU, New York, then there's not really that much to do, right? Or even if you're in a place like the UK or Australia, it's like it's not as student friendly. There's lots of student friendly opportunities and lots of student friendly cities that people like to go to in Ireland. So this is something that's going to be great too as you want to explore. Maybe you want to eventually move to one of these places that you can really sort of get around and get a flavor for it without feeling like, oh, I'm a student and feeling really intimidated. That is something that's real for a lot of people. And so just thinking about that. Now, the only thing to mention out as a downside is that the tuition is going to be higher than a place like Germany. It's not as high as in the UK or in the US or Australia or Canada, but it is going to be higher than a place like Germany or Japan. And there is a housing shortage that's kind of ongoing. And so just keeping that in mind, even though housing is also cheaper, that there's a housing shortage. So you may want to consider what that looks like for you as you're moving forward and considering that option. Maybe you're doing a homestay. Maybe you're going to have to find roommates. You may not have something where you're set up on your own, but that's typically okay for students anyway. But I just wanted to point that out as well. So the next location I wanted to mention for you to consider as an emerging location for study abroad is going to be New Zealand. So shout out to the Kiwis. Ironically, the amount of times when I lived in the UK and also in Italy too, that people came up to me thinking that I was a Kiwi was really fascinating. Like it was just interesting that I didn't, naturally present as an American, but like, are you a Kiwi? I'm like, no, but if you're giving out, honorary status and citizenship, I'll take it. But for New Zealand, they are also a place that is on the map now, emerging as a place that people want to go study abroad. So there's been a 49%, think about it, almost 50% increase in students going to study abroad in New Zealand post pandemic. So we're talking about over the past 5 years, these are the people that are flocking there, wanting to go there, wanting to actually set their foot there and actually do that. And there are some reasons for that. Very similar to the other countries I mentioned, that the fact of you can enroll in a degree program and in a program that even is short term without it being super expensive, and that it is going to be a lot more experimental for you. So you're not just having classroom based, but you're also having research based. But also the fact too that they give you even longer than a lot of the other countries to be able to have a post-work visa and be able to find something. So it's from 1 to 3 years. It does depend on what you're actually doing. So similar to a lot of other countries, including the Big Four, they do try to fill a lot of the skilled workers with their own people, but they also too are accepting of people who are from other countries that want to work there. And especially if you have in-demand skills that are not as fulfillable by people who are from New Zealand, it's going to be an opportunity for you to be able to step in once your degree program is over. Last but not least, too, when it comes to New Zealand, one of the things that people really like is just kind of the overall culture compared to some of the other places I named. It is a little bit more laid back. And this is something that you're obviously not going to get in the Big Four. I mean, to me, the UK is laid back compared to the US, but that's saying a lot because nothing is laid back in the US. But in New Zealand, people sort of like the way that it sort of operates. To me, I would sort of compare it to Hawaii in the US, where it's, a little bit, it runs a little bit differently. They kind of do their own thing compared to the mainland. And so New Zealand is known for being a little bit more like people are a little bit more chill, a little bit more relaxed. And I've heard a lot of students already talk about this. And it's something that through my research, I found that people really enjoy that sort of acclimating to that, especially while they're trying to get through their schooling. Another reason why people choose New Zealand is because of safety. So this is something that is huge. They have very low crime rate. It's an overall very safe country, and again, very similar to a lot of the other countries that I mentioned. Now, in terms of what is popular there right now in terms of studying environmental science, I think you would probably imagine that, again, it is a country that has so many natural resources, and environmental science has really taken off there. Education is another area of study that's become really, really popular in New Zealand for people to come and get degree programs for, and then also to general business and then STEM. So this is kind of a theme that you're seeing around the world in these emerging countries. STEM, business, agriculture, all the different things that you would normally think, well, I need to go to a Big Four country to study. You don't have to do that anymore. And again, it's going to be comparable to what you would get at home or even better. So just consider that. So last but not least, for number 5, I wanted to actually do, it's kind of a 5A and a 5B, because when you're looking at these, they're kind of comparable in a, well, they're not comparable culturally per se, but they are comparable in sort of the emergence. So this is going to be both Spain and Poland for places that students are starting to look at. So for Spain, one of the great things is that there's an increasing number, again, this theme is back, of more and more countries having English speaking programs. They've always had them, but now it's much more of a mainstream thing. So this is great. And with most of the public universities, a degree is going to cost you less than 8,000 US dollars. So if I calculate that at least into British pounds right now, it's probably, I can't remember the exchange rate right now, but probably about 10,000 British pounds. And so, and whatever is going on in Australia, your dollar, and then Canada, you know the configurations. But again, 8,000 US dollars for a degree, like you are winning the lottery right there. Again, it's going to be comparable. They have so many fantastic universities there in a lot of different areas of study. So business, STEM, engineering, all the great things. Just want to point out that very similar to some of the other countries like Germany, that this is for tuition. So housing is still its separate entity. And this is something that you will find for most study abroad programs. Just keeping that in mind. Now, with the industries that are most popular there, definitely going to be humanities, and then going to be business, general business, and then tourism. Tourism is a huge part of the backbone of Spain. So I like to think of it as if Miami was a country. Like, it thrives on tourism. Like, that's like its bread and butter. Or if Las Vegas was a country, sometimes it feels like that way when you're there, like it's its own country. But that's what it thrives on. It really depends on tourism. And so tourism is huge. So if you're interested in working in a hotel, you're interested in working in a bar, you're interested in working in maybe more concierge, there are so many different avenues for that, for tourism as well, particularly in Spain. Now, one of the downsides of Spain compared to some of the other countries is that you only have, and I say only, you only have 12 months to find a job once you're done. So again, you may want to treat it similar to if you were in one of the big 4 where you only had 6 months, where you start a little bit earlier. But I will say that one of the things that's great about Spain is that you often do have an opportunity to get short-term contracts. So it's something to help you fill in the gaps there as you're looking for long-term work. So just think about that can be a downside. There can be a little bit more pressure to it, but they do give you a little bit of a window there to be able to figure out what your next step is. And then for 5B, I wanted to talk about Poland. So now Poland, it has been growing over the past decade or so, and there are now over 100,000 students that study there every year for both short-term programs and for degree programs. Now with Poland, one of the things that a lot of students enjoy is that it's really focused on things in terms of their degree programs, such as engineering, IT, pharma, business. So that is going to be a great place if those types of topics are interesting to you. They are comparable to the other countries I mentioned in terms of the pricing. And the only thing I will mention that I think is probably pretty obvious is that Poland is not necessarily the most cosmopolitan place. So you're not moving there thinking that you're moving to London, but that's okay. Or that you're moving to France or wherever you're going to move to. And it's also, too, not as culturally diverse, which for some students that doesn't matter. But just keeping in mind that those may be some of the downsides of a Poland, but that it is a country that is on the rise for students who would normally want to go to France, or normally want to go to the UK, or normally want to go to Australia, or to come here to the US. So just sort of keeping that in your frame of mind, that it is a place that you definitely should explore, and that they have lots of different opportunities for you too in English speaking degree programs and short-term programs. All right, so I hope this video was helpful for you. Are you considering any of the countries that I mentioned that are emerging, or are you planning to go to one of the big 4 countries? I definitely want to know. Leave me a comment below. What do you think about all this? Do you think that the changes are interesting, and that have you started to even hear from your friends that they're going to just get away from the big 4 and go to a different country? Is it different from what I mentioned? Leave a comment below. I will see you in the next one.